Hey everybody, it's Michelle, and this is Queer Hustle, where we interview queer entrepreneurs and learn about how to start up and scale. And today we have Nancy Shadlock from Centered Life Coaching. And Nancy, you're a coming out coach. I'm so interested to talk to you about this. You want to introduce yourself to everybody?
Sure, yeah. As you said, my name's Nancy. I'm the CEO and founder of Centered Life Coaching. I also host the Coming Out Chronicles podcast. And I live in Calgary with my wife and two babies. And it took me a long time to reconcile I thought I had to divorce my spirituality in order to embrace my sexuality. And when I realized I could bring those together and be authentic in all of who I am, I was able to use my Master of Arts in spiritual formation to help others now bring those things together so they don't have to just have these separate selves. And so now I help people come out of closets of all kinds and live their truth in an empowered way.
I love that so much. We're so all about authenticity here at Queer Hustle and just leading from your authentic self. How did you decide that you wanted to marry these two things? Like you said, spirituality, sexuality. Most people think of these, a lot of people, and I don't, and I love that you're doing this holistically, but a lot of people do think of these as two separate sides of the coin, or they avoid one or the other. Why is it important for us to think about them together? And why do you want to do this work?
I think I grew up quite spiritual, religious, and that was my world. And in order to live there, I had to let go of, I had to just keep pushing down this sexuality side of myself. I had wondered if I was gay for a long time, but it just kept keeping it in the back of my mind. And then, as I was doing my master's in Vancouver, I started to get to know different queer folks that were living authentically who they are and living spiritually. And I started to see oh, there's a way to do this. And this would probably help me live even more authentically. And so then I just started leaning into that more and more.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the chain, right? And that's why we're doing this. That's why we're doing this YouTube and podcast is to have visibility and to show other people hey, there's people doing this, and here's role models. So I love that you're saying, hey, I had role models for this, and before I did, I was I didn't even know this was possible. How important is it for all of us to have those people to look to see what's possible? And then how important is it to turn around and be that role model for somebody else?
It's so important. Just in my podcast this week, I said I needed to know that there was a safe place for me to come out with all of who I am. And I didn't have that safe place until I saw these role models and saw people doing it. And then that's a lot of why I do the podcast that I do. So many people have written in and been thank you for the representation and for showing us not just this sad story of coming out and your family rejects you and you are on the street or these things, but to show these are powerful people living their truth and excelling at what they do. And it's so inspiring to be able to be yeah, I want to live into that for myself.
Absolutely. I'm sure you're inspired by your clients constantly as well, depending on, different people's situations, what they're coming out, what closets are coming out of. Some of this can be extremely terrifying, and it takes a ton of courage. Do you, and obviously, no names or identifying details, but can you kind of share with us maybe one of the more inspiring stories coming out of your work?
Yeah, I just have one that's hot right now. I led a retreat a couple of weeks ago, and one of my participants had just started coming out about her sexuality, and she had told maybe her sister and one other person. And then at the retreat, got this courage to start telling a few more people. And now, only 2 weeks later, she's been on a date, doing all kinds of things, told all the important people in her life about this and feeling so much more free, so much more relieved. She was racked with anxiety before that. And it's just so incredible to see the difference in her from that. It's called the Shift Retreat. And she truly experienced a shift.
She made that shift. She came a little bit out and then she came all the way out real fast. I love that. So you're working in retreats, these shift retreats. Tell us a little bit about how that works and why you want to work with people in groups like that, or what, how does that help the work?
I've always been passionate about retreats. I've been on many myself, and I can see that when we extricate ourselves from our normal life and get into this other space, it does something. and then also being in a room with other people who want this, it's synergistic. And so it's so much more impactful than just like one-on-one or um, trying to go it alone. And so yeah, I did one in January that was live or in person, and then I did one just 2 weeks ago that was virtual because of COVID. So it's been cool to see that even pivoting like that, it was still so impactful. And we were together over 2.5 days. And like, yes, we had a little bit of Zoom exhaustion, but it was still so deep and impactful, and people connected in amazing ways after just such a short time. And then saw huge shifts in each other's lives, which I think spurred each other on to do even more shifts.
I love retreats so much, and we do them in my business with our mastery clients, our mastermind clients, and I miss the in-person retreats so
Mm-hmm.
much. It was always just the coolest and most special experience, especially sometimes when clients were coming to their first retreat. There'd be people that I'd been working with virtually for a long time and had never met in person, and people getting to meet each other in person. We've been trying to replicate that on Zoom as well. I think we do okay, but it doesn't feel the same to me as an extrovert. Are a lot of people right now dealing with these kind of pivots, right, for COVID?
Mm-hmm.
How are you keeping happy with having to pivot, from the format that you love so much and that you really wanted into, a less ideal format? How do you like keep your mindset up about that?
I think it's just a matter of getting creative. Like I had one little experiment this week that maybe it flopped, maybe it didn't. I don't know. Someone wrote in their coming out story. I read it on the podcast, and then in it, she was saying that she wanted to start dating, and so I've seen more and more of my clients that are in that space and are getting frustrated with COVID, that it's online dating is so frustrating and can't meet people. And I was like, I know so many thoughtful lesbians. Why don't I get them all together? And so I just like created this community call for them to come together, and not that many people signed up. A lot of people were interested, but for some reason or another they didn't. So I'm I'm curious about that, if it was just timing or if it's the format or what. But it's been fun to just like hold everything loosely and be like, COVID times are times to play and experiment and just try things.
I love this so much, because I think a lot of times, and especially in a format like this, people want to talk about their successes and what's going right and what's going well. But as entrepreneurs, we know that our successes are really like a series of micro failures and learning. And
Mm-hmm.
like we try it works or it doesn't. We learn something, we try something again, and that's how we get better and better over time. It makes me really happy that you're just transparently sharing, like, hey, here's a thing that I tried and it like may or may not work. How much have you done that in the past, or how much have you learned from like screwing up?
Yeah, that's the only way. Like
It's like
you
only
learn you learn more from the screw ups than from the amazing successes, I think. And yeah, like my business has ebb and flowed for years now. Like I finished my master's in 2012 and strictly did spiritual direction, which is like this very obscure term. Nobody really knows what it is. And then I started to realize like, oh, okay, people might want to come to me for things other than just I have this spiritual problem. And so I did some extra certifications and branched out into coaching so I could meet people with frustrations of their job or their relationship. And then since coming back from maternity leave, it's when I've really pivoted into like recognizing that 80% of my clientele has been queer. So I might as well focus in on that and really kind of come out as a coming out coach and zero in on that. So yeah, I love how entrepreneurship lets you just like ebb and flow and try things and keep growing.
yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned just coming off maternity leave, working parent, especially an entrepreneur working parent, especially in these times, not the easiest thing. I have two kids myself, and lots of people I work with have kids, and everyone's on the struggle bus a little bit. Are you on the struggle bus up there?
Yeah, it's hard being all together in the same house a lot of the time. And I'm super grateful. My wife is very supportive of my business, and she's full-time employed too. She's a social worker. Um, and so we've just decided to allocate money to putting kids in childcare and having a few days a week where I can really concentrate on this work and then it's not so chaotic at our house. I can do an interview like this and not have kids screaming outside.
And up in Canada with more options than we have in the United States right now. So I'm just seething with envy right now for your government and your response where you can be in childcare. We're all down here with kids still in the house and everything else right now. It's been a lot. I love that you brought up your wife and how supportive she is. We don't talk enough about our entrepreneurial partners and spouses and how key that and clutch that is. It's to the point, you know, it's so important that when I'm talking to a prospective client that wants to scale a business and they mention something about their partner not being supportive, you know, and it breaks my heart because sometimes I'll talk to people and they'll say, you know, my partner is just constantly bugging me to get a job or doesn't understand why I want to do this or is, you know, even like upset at me for doing this. It comes to a point where I almost have to turn people down sometimes and say, you know, it's going to be really hard to work with you in this situation because my voice as a coach can't be louder than the person who's laying next to you and kind of whispering in your ear every night. And it's almost a deal breaker for me as a coach to take on somebody with an unsupported. And of course, I don't get into people's like marital dynamics. Sometimes I want to. Sometimes I want to be like, get out. That sounds really toxic and bad. But it's not my place to do that. What does it mean to you to have such a supportive spouse? Like, do you agree with me that that's key, or do you feel like?
Oh, totally. Yeah, and it hasn't always been this way. Like I think when I first was starting out a lot more, she had trouble seeing the vision for it. She had trouble, like she's never experienced life like this, has always like had a 9 to 5 and a steady job and things like that. And I grew up with entrepreneurial parents, so I'm a little bit more used to it. And so it's been interesting seeing the ways that she's opened up to it and grown in her trust of it and in her support of me. And I think as I've become more and more steady and sure in what I'm doing, it translates. And I think you're right to turn people away sometimes because yeah, you're right. It can be so conflicting. And also sometimes that spouse sees things that you wouldn't see as a coach. And so they might be onto something as well.
Well, that's true. I mean, I've definitely noticed that people tend to marry their opposites, and the same thing with people who partner in business. Sometimes we get people that are doing both, which I kind of think is crazy, but and they know I think they're crazy. Sometimes it works. You know, they're working with their spouse, but you always kind of have one that's the driver and like moving forward, and the you know, the ambitious, like, let's go, you know, decisive one, and one that's a little more cautious and kind of pulling back on the way. Whoa, wait a second, we need to think more about this. And when it works really well. And when it doesn't work, it can be really, really frustrating for both people. But you're right, it's not a black and white, like your spouse is supportive or not. Sometimes there's a little bit of a, you know, hey, trust me here, and a little bit of a process kind of getting somebody enrolled in your vision.
Yeah, for sure.
Your personal life, your work life, being all in the same house together, helping all these other clients with their personal lives and their work lives and marrying all these things together, sexuality, spirituality, all this holistic stuff, right? You're putting out a ton of emotional labor, emotional energy, holding a lot of space for a lot of people and a lot of things. How do you take care of yourself?
I've started allocating Wednesdays as my soul day. So yeah, as much as I possibly can, I just unplug, go lay in a hammock in the forest. Now it's snowing in Canada, so I've been having baths and just like doing things that get me away from caring for all the people and all the things and care for myself. Because you're right, like if I just keep giving, I'll be depleted.
I love that so much. I'm such a huge fan of time blocking and such a nerd about it. I have ADHD, so it really helps me have those blocks on my calendar. I've been lately trying this with Tuesdays for my creative day because I want, you know, I have lots of things that I want to be writing and trainings to create and things like that. And I was finding it really hard with my staff and my kids and my clients to carve out the time to do that. So about 4 or 6 weeks ago, I just said, nobody can call me on Tuesdays. This is what we're doing on Tuesdays. And I love it. I'm getting so much more done. There was a little bit of an adjustment period for the other people in my life who were used to being able to access me all the time. And so, you know, anytime we set a new boundary, there's a little bit of a pushback. Have you had that experience with your soul days, or are people pretty respectful?
Sure. Yeah, well, this interview is on a Wednesday and it just wasn't movable.
Oh, you're too thank you. This is my production day. I appreciate you. Some of your soul days.
Yeah.
So I'm the one that screwed up your boundary.
Yeah, I tried. I did actually push back and say, could we do it on another day? And they're like, no, Wednesday's her day to do it. So
No, because that's what I said. Because we can't be having interviews all over the place and creative time all over. You know what I mean? I'm putting
yeah.
makeup on and coming downtown one day a week, and it's Wednesday. Okay.
Totally.
The rest of the time I'm home. I'm in my pajamas. All this is like up in some kind of bun.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. So we talk a lot, on especially on this show about being queer in business, the intersection of queerness in business, or queering capitalism as a paradigm in general. And I just kind of ask, like, how does that relate with you and your work? Obviously, your work is centered on coming out. So lots and
Mhm.
lots of relevance there. But we get the question all the time, like, what does being queer have to do with business? Why do you even talk about these things in the same context? Aren't business tips applicable to anybody? I don't know, what would you say to that?
I think what I've been leaning into lately is that my queerness is my path to wholeness. And so as I've been able to own that and lean into it, um, so much has opened up as far as my business, because it's so much more authentic of who I am. And so that's why I love helping other people with that. Like if there's a part of them that they're keeping in a closet, they're not going to be thriving at their fullest. And so when we can get honest about what's still hiding and bring that into the light, it may not be as scary as you think it is. And it may actually be where the jewels are hidden.
Yeah, absolutely. Just the mental toll, the psychological toll that it takes to walk around with something like that, to be in the closet.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's hard to have the full capacity that you have otherwise when you're sitting on something like that. That's just taking up so much of your bandwidth. Yeah.
Totally.
Are there times when you would recommend that people don't come out or don't come out yet?
Yeah, I think you have to listen into your own feelings about it, and if you don't feel safe, yeah, don't do it. There's no timeline of what you must do. Like I said, like I needed to have safe spaces to come out. I tried a few different times. Like I tried in high school, and my mentor was like, no, this is where it says in the Bible that you can't do this.
Mm-hmm,
Let's just pray
mm-hmm,
it away.
mm-hmm.
And tried again in university, and the mentors were like, no, it's probably just codependence. That friendship that you have, it's probably just codependence. It's probably not that you're in love with her. You
Just
need to work
gals
on
being
that.
pals.
Yeah. And so when like I had to wait until I had a community that had wrestled with this and was like, no, actually you can totally be gay and it's okay. And it's like, wow, okay.
Okay, no praying the gay away.
No.
It's in there. You got to address it. You got to deal with it. What does it do to people who are sitting on something like that? I mean, we talked about the capacity that it takes up, but how else does it manifest
Mhm.
negatively in other areas of life when you're kind of holding this secret in?
Yeah, like anxiety, body pain, um, loss of friendships or relationships, um, loss of business.
Mm-hmm.
There's all kinds of things that you miss out on or are in pain about because of that hiding.
It's interesting that you mentioned loss of business as a side effect, because we see a lot of fear in the other direction. People who want to start businesses, or have already been in business, being
Mm-hmm.
afraid to come out because they're afraid it's going to negatively affect their business. Especially, I notice that with older people sometimes, and people who live in different areas of the country or the world. And
Mm-hmm.
obviously, there are varying, like literal varying levels of danger based on where you live in the country or the world. But we see the opposite too. There's often quite a boost effect on somebody's business once they're able to be authentic. People are
Yeah.
more drawn to them when they're more self-realized.
I have a client that's in that position right now where she's like, I do art and design for this person that or organization that does that. They're my bread and butter. Like they give me the majority of my contracts, and yet I don't think they'll be okay with me coming out. And so I've been asking her that, like, what is the toll that that's taking on you, of you not being able to be your authentic self, and like how is that manifesting?
Right.
So that, because really, like if you could let them go, it would be amazing to see who would spring up in their place and how much more enlivened you'd feel working for someone like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's, people get in the scarcity mentality, and they
Mm-hmm.
think, well, I can't let this client go because then where will my money come from? Well, you're not opening up the possibility for other things to come into your life, into your experience, if you're holding on to this thing that's not
Mm-hmm.
great.
Totally.
And at a certain point, money is important, and also being yourself is important, and feeling safe and feeling able to be free with who you are. Obviously different
Mm-hmm.
people prioritize that differently, but to
Yeah.
me it take I'm not saying there's not a price, but it'd take a lot of money for me to put myself in an environment where I didn't feel safe or accepted for who I was.
Mm-hmm.
So awesome that you're helping people get to that place. What's your favorite thing about your work?
Seeing that freedom come into people's lives, where they dropped this heaviness that has been on their shoulders, and they're just like, yeah, this is who I am. I like who I am. I'm going to share this with the world. I love seeing that.
There's that lightness and that joy
Mm-hmm.
that comes out when somebody's able to kind of take that mask off.
And seeing people's gifts come more into the light. Like, one of my favorite things is helping people realize what is special about them,
Yeah.
and then empowering them to share that with the world, because that's a lot of why I do the work that I do. Is I want to make this world a better place, especially for my babies. Like, I want a whole world full of people that are using their gifts and sharing them with other people, because how awesome would that world be?
That is the world I'm working for too. I'm so happy to be working alongside you for that outcome. That's beautiful. The more we can all be self-actualized, self-realized, shine our gifts in the world, the better the world is going to be.
Yeah. I actually have a session called Discover Your Superpowers, where people can come, and in an hour we can actually pinpoint like 4 words that are their power words and their purpose in the world and their life's work.
I love that so much. We all have unique mission, unique purpose, unique superpowers. Every one of us is a superstar, a genius, superhero.
Mm-hmm.
We just got to figure out what it is that we're a genius at, right?
Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's hard to know where to go to help figure that out for yourself. So I love that I can offer that.
Get a coach, people. We all say that. We say
Yeah.
this every time, whether we're talking. Sometimes I'm talking to a coach, sometimes I'm not. But either way, get a get a coach. I have a coach. I am a
Yeah.
coach. I have a coach. Nancy's a coach.
I have a coach.
Nancy has a coach. We all have coaching is fantastic. Therapy is great. So is coaching.
Yeah.
Totally different aspects of what it's doing. But if you're stuck and you need to get moved along to an outcome, like, cannot recommend hiring a coach enough.
The way I see it is, like, therapy is a little bit more past focused and working through that stuff. Spiritual direction, which I was traditionally doing, is more like present focused and helping people like notice where the divine is showing up in their life right now and how can they connect with that. And then coaching is forward focused of like, what's next? What are you moving towards, and visioning and making that a reality.
Absolutely. And we need to do all three.
Yeah.
So I love this holistic approach. This is so cool. Thank you so much for being on, Nancy Shadlock, Centered Life Coaching. Pleasure to chat with you. And for the rest of you, we will see you next time. Bye.
Thanks for having me.